I loved my grandfather, but I didn't see him often. In my 16 years, this was the 7th or 8th time we had come to visit him on vacation, together with my parents. Granddad was an erudite and multi-talented man. You could sense it in his proud bearing, his eloquent speech with its precise diction, his ability to emphasize the right word. In his monologues, to enhance their reception, he could either amplify his voice or reduce it to a whisper, and then his entire speech would turn into a theatrical performance. On each of our trips to him, he always found time to tell me a new story, perhaps even one from his own life. And now, after sitting by the fire for half an hour after dinner, Granddad began his tale. As always, I perked up my ears, set aside my book, and prepared to hear his latest interesting story. What you will hear from me today, I have not even told your father, my own son. I will tell you a story that will be a part of my personal life. A very important part. Listen. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. It happened in 1918. That was a formidable, unforgettable time. Houses and entire villages were burning, the very earth was burning, set afire in turn by the hearts of people so close, yet at times so different, the whites and the reds. I was barely 5 years old then, and my parents and I found ourselves at the very heart of the Civil War. We lived in the village of Zalonica, located in the Mariinskaya Vallis of the Barnaul. That summer of 18, the Kolchakites had already taken over our village. For a time, a detachment led by Lieutenant Romanovsky was stationed in our village. My father was somewhat acquainted with him and therefore took him in as a boarder for a few days. However, soon the entire Romanovsky detachment was routed by the partisans of the anarchist Rogov, who was fighting on the red side, near the village of Sorokino. As soon as Rogov's men occupied our Zalonica, the locals immediately gave up my parents as sheltering white guards. My mother and father were shot without trial or investigation that very day. And that evening, I fled into the forest. All evening and almost all night, I wandered through the woods, trying to reach the village of Zavialika, where my father's relatives lived. But I got lost in the forest, tired and hungry, and fell asleep, burying myself in the first haystack I found. That's where the local healer, a rumored sorcerer named Artemon, found me the next morning. Seeing me in the haystack, he approached and asked, "Whose child are you? Where did you come from and how did you end up here?" Seeing the big bearded man coming up to the haystack on his wagon, I was frightened at first and started crying. The man stroked my head and said, or rather asked, "Do you have parents?" HH had them. I cried even louder. TH they KK killed them. He took my hand and said in a quiet voice, "Come with me. We'll somehow live together." And so my life with Artemon began. He must have noticed something about me right away, as soon as he saw me. And he asked, "Do you want to become a sorcerer? Like you?" "Roughly like me." "Is that good or bad?" "If you help people, it will be good. If you harm them, it will be bad." I sighed again and said, "All right." He taught me everything he knew, and he knew a great deal. Sometimes it seemed to me that there was nothing he didn't know and couldn't do. And I, like a sponge, absorbed all the wisdom of healing from him. I studied herbs, their properties, and ways of applying them. He taught me prayers, incantations against all diseases, and other sorcerer's wisdom. By the age of 10, I could remove spells, heal illnesses, and relieve pain with a simple touch of the hand. Almost every day, people came to Artemon for help. He refused no one. They paid him with food. He didn't take money. Gradually, he began to entrust me with performing some of his healing duties, and I slowly got involved in the healing craft. Once or twice a month, Artemon would leave the house for the whole night. When I asked where he was going, he always answered, "I have to leave to commune with nature, to fathom its secrets and mysteries. You just lie down and sleep peacefully. No one will ever hurt you here. I'll be back by morning." Then he would return at dawn, and our usual workday would begin. He taught me to read, write, and count. He had books, including fiction, which I liked to read and reread in my spare time. Soon I became curious about his past. But he didn't tell anything about it. He only mentioned that his parents were wealthy and educated people who had been exiled here by the Tsar's decree and had died here long ago. "Why do you live alone?" I would ask him more than once. At first, he answered evasively. Then he began to explain more clearly, and I understood that it was connected with his abilities and his healing. "Solitude is the lot of the strong, the weak always cling to the crowd," he would always repeat. But the world is so vast, interesting, and beautiful. You yourself taught me that, I would ask him. You'll understand later, he would reply gloomily. And so we lived together until I was 16. And then one night, as he was about to go into the forest as usual, he changed his mind, stopped, and asked me. We've lived together for 11 years. In that time, you've learned a lot from me and understood that most of the knowledge and skills you've acquired haven't come to you just like that. You were able to accept all this not only thanks to me, your teacher, but also because of your innate abilities. You couldn't just learn how to soothe pain, put a person to sleep, hear their thoughts, and so on. And you've known that for a long time. As soon as I saw you, I knew you would manage it all. But there's one more ability that we have that ordinary people don't possess. What else can you do that I don't know about? I asked him. Yesterday you turned 16, and I can reveal to you the mystery of transformations. If you want to, you can master this art. Would you like me to show you its full beauty? Yes, I answered him. Show me. This was the only thing I had not learned from him until then. Good, look, but don't be afraid. After a while, it became completely dark. A huge moon emerged from the clouds and illuminated the yard outside the window, the road leading to the river and the village, the edge of the forest, and even the chain of hills that were barely visible even during the day. Artemon had barely managed to open the door to the street when he fell on his back and began to roll on the floor. And to my horror, I noticed how his strong and beautiful hands began to thin and shorten in length. His fingers uncurled, making room for claws. His back and chest shrank in size and rounded. Thick gray fur quickly sprouted all over his body. Within 2 minutes, I saw before me a large werewolf, who was even beautiful in some way. The werewolf growled, and in that growl I heard, "We'll talk tomorrow, go to sleep." He leaped out the open door and disappeared into the night. That night I slept poorly, and I dreamed of werewolves, an entire pack of them, and it was as if I was with them, a young, strong wolf, running on a hunt, then tearing the warm flesh of prey with my teeth. In the morning, Artemon roused me from my haze. He stroked my head again and said, "Well, did you enjoy what you saw?" And I said, "Yes." "Shall we master the transformations?" "We will," I said. "For this, there is an ancient ritual of becoming a werewolf." He then described all the details of the ritual to me. "Remember this firmly, the day may come when this ritual may be useful to you. The ritual will be performed in the second half of the night of the full moon. A fire must be lit on the edge of the forest. For the werewolf ritual, a wolf is needed, but a wolf cub will do, it must bite you. I will brew a special decoction from the following herbs: blackcurrant leaves, blackberry, raspberry, St. John's wort, pear, and rosehip. I'll pour boiling water over them and boil them for 15 to 20 minutes. Then I'll wrap the decoction and let it steep overnight. Then I'll strain it and pour it into a clean container. Next, I'll add a ladle of honey to a ladle of the decoction and simmer it in the oven for about half an hour. Then I'll add 500 grams of vodka, mix it, and put it in the cellar on ice until the ritual. We'll start the ritual as soon as the moon disk reaches its highest point. You'll strip to the waist, stand with your back to the fire, drink a mug of the decoction and say next words, 'I forgot it.' Will I be a werewolf for the rest of my life?" "Yes, if you want to. Within a year after the ritual, you can perform a purification ritual. After all, only a born werewolf cannot change their essence. Afterwards, I'll tell you the reverse ritual. But remember, if you perform this ritual, one of your descendants will acquire the werewolf gift whether they want it or not. And they, in turn, within exactly 1 year, can, if they wish, get rid of this gift through the purification ritual. But only within 1 year from the day of their 16th birthday until the first full moon." On the night of the ritual, Artemon brought a wolf cub in his teeth, which was fiercely growling and trying to bite its tormentor. Of course, as soon as I held out my hand to it, it immediately sank its sharp teeth into it with all its might, and with a triumphant rumble, it immediately dashed back into the forest. From that day on, 2 werewolves made their nightly sorties in the neighborhood. It was a wonderful feeling of strength, agility, and speed as we raced, catching up with a poor hare or a trembling deer. The taste of the warm blood of the victim, the sound of its crushed bones. All this filled me, the young werewolf, with delight. Until we ran into the hunters quite unexpectedly. A hunt for wolves had been organized in the village, and we didn't know about it. Artemon then saved me, covering me with his body from the bullet, as the shooter was aiming the rifle at the beast. I won't say what I did to that shooter then. In the morning I sat at the table, put my head in my hands and cried for a long time. In 11 years, I had not only gotten used to Artemon, but had even come to love this fine man in my own way. After a while, I realized that the saying about loneliness just wasn't for me. And that I need to go to people. And most importantly, I need to go without the werewolf gift. At the next full moon, I successfully performed the purification ritual. After that, it was the life of an ordinary person, studying at the evening school in Gorno Altius, then the Pedagogical Institute in Barnaul. Then there was the war, the draft in July 1941, a bunch of wounds, 2 medals for courage, the Order of Glory medals. But you've seen and know all of that. I've lived an interesting life and have never regretted the past. 5 years ago, we buried your grandmother. I met her a year before the war. She was a wonderful loyal friend to me for almost 58 years. Your father was born in 46. And today I called you to my 90th birthday alone to specifically tell you about the werewolf gift that has been sitting in you for 16 years now, waiting for the first full moon. And I also want to say, stunned by all this unexpected information that had fallen on me, I didn't notice or hear his granddad suddenly started wheezing. His left hand reached for his heart, and his right hand was groping in the pocket of his robe, searching for pills. I only noticed all this when Granddad stopped wheezing and his hand hung limply down. His head slumped to his shoulder, his back resting against the chair back. Only then did I realize that my beloved grandfather was gone. He had left, without saying goodbye. But the main thing is, he didn't have time to tell me the ritual to cleanse myself of the terrible gift. I shook him for a long time, yelled and scolded Granddad, then cried, pleaded and begged him to reveal the purification ritual to me. But Granddad was silent. It felt stuffy in this large hall with the windows sealed. I went to the nearest window, parted the curtains and flung it wide open. The fresh coolness of the July night rushed in through the window. It became a little easier. But then I noticed how the huge moon was emerging from behind the clouds. A terrible force threw me to the floor. The world spun before my eyes. I rolled on the floor, afraid to look at how my body was changing, how huge claws were emerging, my teeth transforming, and thick gray fur sprouting from everywhere. A few minutes later, I felt a wonderful lightness throughout my body, the power of fangs, the might of claws, and a bouquet of scents that teased and beckoned me to the forest. Letting out a triumphant growl, I made a huge leap out the window and raced madly into the forest, toward a new reality,